Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll show you Britner's Garage Redux. What do I mean by that? Over the years, I've put a lot of build videos on my channel, but some of the older ones were just photos put to music. Now that I'm able to add narration to them, I've redone a few of the more popular ones from the past, describing how I built these. Today we're going to be looking at Britner's Garage from Carolina Craftsman kits. Jeff Grove based this on a gas station that was in Williamsport, Maryland. Here's what you get inside the kit. It's a laser cut kit, and I first started by cutting the walls away from the sprues and then cutting the window and door openings out of the wall. The next thing I did was cut out all of the laser cut windows and doors. Then I sanded them all to make sure they would fit in the openings they were supposed to. I used my Medford Tools miter tool to cut a 45-degree angle on the brick walls. And I'm sorry this is out of production. If anyone ever runs across one, I suggest you pick it up. This gives a perfect 45-degree angle so the brick walls meet right at the corner. Then I started gluing my walls together, using corner bracing to hold them in place. I didn't need to brace the actual walls since I wouldn't be staining them. I then painted the windows and the door trim a red color, and then put all of the glass into the window frames and put the doors together. Once I had my building all put together and it was dry, I prepared it for painting. If any of the corners weren't meeting perfectly, I used a little bit of putty to fill any gaps. And I airbrushed it with 2 coats of a white color. This building was going to be in fairly good shape, so I'm not doing that much weathering on the paint. Then I masked around the upper part and used the same red color to put an accent stripe around the base of the building. I put a couple small pieces of strip wood behind the window openings to hold the windows in place. Then I glued the windows and doors into the building, just using tacky glue for this. I wanted to do an interior, so I put together a few photos of gas station interiors and I made an interior wall. And then I cut and fit all of these printouts into the inside of my station. It would have been easier before it was put together, but then I would have gotten paint all over them. I also painted the chimney to match the building. Now I started on the roof, and I made a couple of supports that went in the roof card that came with the kit, just to make it easier to put the roof together. With a hip roof, it's important that all the pieces fit together well, especially at the base of the roof. So once I had all my pieces cut correctly, I started to use V-cut shingles that I had gotten from rail scale models. Now the trick to having diamond cut shingles or V-cut shingles put together is to match up the points with the valleys. I have a whole tutorial about how to do this on my channel. It's under the New Tracks Alton Fire Station build if you want to take a look at it. After I had all of my shingling done on my roof pieces, I glued them all together and the roof portion was done. So I moved on to the base of the building. I sprayed it a concrete color. I had planned to have this as a small diorama, so I took a piece of foam core and I sprayed it with a couple shades of camouflage just to give it a base color. Then I put the concrete pad on it and I traced around it, and then cut out the top portion of the foam core so that the pad would sit down in it. Next I put a couple small pieces of strip wood inside there and used AK asphalt terrain that went over the pieces of strip wood. Then once it dried, I was able to cut those out, and I had the asphalt leading right up to the hole I had cut for the pad. Then for the rear of the gas station, I used Vallejo ground texture and a couple of acrylics mixed to just give it a base color. Then I used some of my weathering pigments to put some track marks and other dirt on the concrete pad and the asphalt leading up to it. Now for the interior of the station, I had gotten an interaction glass display case. I've always loved interaction parts. And this one went together pretty easily. After punching out the parts, I ended up gluing the base together and then sanding it square with my Ultimation sander. Then I started building the framework that went on the case. And this went together very easily. I had printed out a background to go in the case with some automotive items in it. And then I cut out a couple of plastic pieces and painted them. They would end up sitting in the display case, just to look like some oil cans and other parts that a gas station might carry. Now my plan for lighting the station was to use a couple of bulbs and a battery holder that I had in my junk box. I wired the battery holder inside the station, and then on the roof I had a couple of copper strips that I attached the bulbs to. And it was going to be a removable roof, so I could replace them if I needed to. And I checked to make sure everything was working properly. Then I soldered a plug onto the battery pack so I could unplug it. Thinking about it later, I wish I had just put the battery pack in the back room. But I went ahead and had the wires coming up to where they'd contact the copper strips when I put the ceiling in place, and it seems to work. Now, to make the roof removable, I had to have a way that the front support posts would be held up. So I measured them and put a couple of holes in the concrete pad, and then put some steel rods in them. And once they were glued in place and perfectly upright, the posts would slide right over them. And the posts were made out of styrene. This way my roof was removable, and when it was put in place, the contacts would allow the lights to light. Now for the Britner sign that goes on the roof, the printout that came in the kit was a little light. So I scanned it and brought it into Photoshop. I wanted to be able to save that script, and I could rebuild everything else. So I used my magic wand to trace around the script. Then I made a solid orange base that would go behind everything, and I copied the script into place and just typeset the word garage. But the copy was bitmapped, and I wanted to be able to smooth it out. So using my airbrush tool, I was able to go around the edges and give it a nice smooth look. And you can see how the upper one looks better than the lower one. Then once I put it together with some other signs, I made a printout, and I started working on the sign to go on the roof. I attached both sides to a thin piece of styrene, and then painted the edge of it. Then I put a few pins into the styrene after drilling it, and I drilled matching holes in the roof and mounted the sign. I changed my mind a couple times about what type of gas I wanted, but I finally decided Texaco was going to be it. So I made a Texaco sign using printouts, and I glued a couple pieces of chain to it, and then by supporting it upside down, I used more super glue to glue the sign to a pole that would be coming out from the roof. Then I started working on some other details. I had gotten an air gauge, and I mounted that onto the side wall and made a hose for it. I also put in a little ding-ding hose that goes over the concrete pad. And I got some interaction cinder blocks and painted those up. And I had gotten some empty bottles from mini prints, so I had to make a box that would hold the empties and go next to my soda machine. Then I did another round of weathering using artist pigments, and I did the roof and the building and some more of the pad. I also did a bit of staining on the pad where oil would be dropped. And I moved on to starting to do the landscaping around the back of the diorama. I love using Martin Wellberg products for this. And I picked a selection of foliage that I wanted to apply to the back of it. The trick is to use a wide variety, especially stuff that ends up looking like weeds. Now it was time to do the gas pumps. And again, I went back to Interaction because I love their gas pumps. You put them together in layers, and in between each layer you can sandwich the readout and the glass that goes over it. It makes for a very realistic look. Then I used my sanding stick to go over the edges and make sure the corners were nice and round. And I did a couple rounds of painting and then sanding again to make sure that there were no layers showing. And when I finally had my last layer of paint on, I glued the ends on to the edges of the pump. And then another round of light sanding made it look like the paint was wearing off the metal. Then I picked which logos I wanted to put onto the pumps, and I glued those on. Then I did all the attachment of the hoses and the hardware that goes onto the pumps, and then glued them in place. Now for the soda machines, I got these from Dave's Decals. I first painted them all white, and then used the decals, and the way that they go around, they go on pretty well. I had my choice of which ones I wanted to use. They come out really nice, but I think their scale might be a little small. Then I did my last round of weathering once all the details were in place, and I took it outside to take some pictures. I really enjoyed building this gas station. Finding all the details and putting them in place, building the interior, and weathering all the parts just a little bit so that they looked like they were used, but they weren't falling apart. This was a fun project, and I'm really happy with how it came out. Like I say, the only thing I think I'd do different is put the batteries inside the building. I hope you enjoyed seeing how this went together. And as always, I appreciate you watching and hope you come back for more.